wind screamed like a razor, and the single, strangled cry of Elara Vance was swallowed whole by the thundering storm. It lasted only a heartbeat. Rain lashed her face, blurring her vision, yet she felt the cold, brutal push in the small of her back. Silas. No! Everything became a chaotic tumble. She was flung from the wagon like discarded baggage. Her head struck rock, a searing pain, followed by a sickening crack from her leg. Then came the terrifying dark plunge. She landed, crushed and still, at the bottom of the deep ravine. Cold mud instantly soaked her dark gown. The only heat was the trickle of blood from her temple and the fierce, primitive contractions already seizing her abdomen, threatening to expel the tiny life too soon. She reached for the leather pouch at her waist but found only empty air. The deed papers were gone. Above, the creaking of the wagon wheels faded rapidly. Silas and Hester made no pause. They had left her to perish. The betrayal was more agonizing than her broken body. Air fled Elara's lungs, and darkness claimed her, carrying her final whispered apology. "I'm sorry, my little Dawn." A few hours earlier, the atmosphere had been thick with false promise. It was April 1847, and the 26-wagon caravan had left Independence, Missouri, carrying the smell of possibility and desperation. For Elara Vance, widowed just weeks before, the journey was supposed to be salvation. Her late husband's land grant in Oregon was her only legacy, her child's only birthright. Her brother-in-law, Silas Thorne, had offered her passage. "Family takes care of family," he'd sneered, his eyes never meeting hers. Elara, frail and 6 months pregnant, had accepted. But as they pressed through the treacherous Cumberland Gap, the true cost of Silas's charity became terrifyingly clear. Silas, a man consumed by avarice, had repeatedly attempted to relieve Elara of the land grant documents, his fingers twitching toward the pouch. Now, as the storm turned the mountain pass into a river of mud, he saw his chance. Elara's last conscious memory was seeing the dark, triumphant figures of Silas and Hester receding. They hadn't just abandoned her, they had committed murder for a piece of paper. Hours later, the rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, enhancing the deadly silence of the wilderness. Kestrel, a Shawnee hunter, moved with the quiet grace of a forest phantom. He was tracking a wounded deer, a crucial hunt for his family. His path had brought him dangerously close to the settler's trail, a violation of Chief Stone Bear's strict warnings. He was about to turn back when he saw it. Not the deer's blood, but a foreign sign. Lodged between two roots was a scrap of white silk, embroidered with a delicate E. Right next to it, the long, unmistakable furrow cut into the embankment. Evidence not of an animal, but of a heavy, sliding human body. This was no accident. Kestrel descended into the ravine. The sight of Elara, pale and broken, instantly triggered his dilemma. Then he saw the swollen belly. He was a warrior, a hunter, bound by the safety of his band. Chief Stone Bear's decree was absolute. The white man's justice falls heavily on any of our people found near their trails, regardless of purpose. But Kestrel was also a man raised in a tribe where life was sacred. He heard the faint, pained moans and saw the woman's protective hand on her abdomen. To leave her was to condemn two souls. He stood at the crossroads of survival and sanctity. He immediately assessed her. A clean break in the lower leg, a head wound, and terrifying, rigid cramping. The child was coming. He chose sanctity. Kestrel gathered strong saplings, using strips of his deerskin pack to lash them into a travois. He placed Elara onto the makeshift sledge with surprising gentleness. As he worked, Elara's eyes flickered open, eyes the color of a stormy sky, clouded with pain and primal fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice a painful rasp. "My baby." Kestrel held up his open palms, the universal sign of peace. He spoke the broken English he knew from limited trade. Not harm, help. Climax of Act 1. With methodical efficiency, Kestrel secured her broken leg with improvised splints. He looked up toward the hidden path leading to his village, then down at the woman. He didn't know her language or her world, but their bond was now etched in her blood and his decision. He pulled the travois. 4-hour travel, he stated simply, and began the arduous, dangerous ascent into the deep woods. He had crossed the line. The journey was a torment. Every root, every stone in the rugged Shawnee hunting path sent jolts of agony through Alara. She bit back her screams, determined not to slow the man who was risking everything for her. Kestrel, moving with the silent, tireless rhythm of a man utterly at home in the wilderness, pulled the travois with steady determination. He would pause to check on her, offering sips of water. "Why?" Alara managed to ask during one pause. "Why risk your life for someone like me?" Kestrel paused, touching her swollen belly. "Gift from Creator," he said, his voice quiet but profound. As the late afternoon light faded, Alara's contractions grew closer, violent and terrifyingly regular. She knew the child was coming too soon. They were traversing a steep, hidden ridge when a particularly violent contraction seized Alara. She cried out, a raw, guttural sound of desperation. The travois stopped instantly. Alara's water broke. The moment of decision was upon them. Kestrel, heart pounding, knew he couldn't reach the village in time. His people's custom dictated men wait outside, but there was no outside here, only the cold, wet forest floor. He had to act. Climax of Chapter 3. Kestrel, using the knowledge his grandmother Willow Bloom had taught him about healing and herbs, quickly cleared an area. He spoke encouragement in his native tongue, a sound that strangely calmed Alara. With the primal force of her pain in his careful guidance, Alara pushed. The cry was thin but unmistakable. Alara had given birth to a tiny premature baby girl right there on the muddy travois, with only a Shawnee hunter for a midwife. Kestrel quickly cut the cord with his hunting knife and wrapped the infant in his buckskin shirt. "Daughter," he announced, his voice thick with reverence. "Small but strong." Kestrel gave the call, a distinctive imitation of a woodland bird, and within minutes, 2 Shawnee scouts appeared. Their shock at the sight of the white woman and the newborn baby was profound, but they saw the severity of the situation. The site of the Shawnee village, nestled secretly in the valley, was Alara's last lucid image before the pain overwhelmed her. They stopped before the largest dwelling, where Willow Bloom, the esteemed medicine woman, emerged. Her face was a map of 75 winters. "Grandson," Willow Bloom said sternly in Shawnee, her eyes fixing on the tiny, premature infant, "you have brought a fire to our lodge." But after inspecting the pair, her tone shifted. She was abandoned. To let her child die on our soil would be a failure of the spirit. She instructed them to carry Alara inside. Alara clutched Kestrel's arm. "My baby," she whispered. "Is she safe?" "Star who watches," Kestrel translated, referring to his grandmother's title. "Strong medicine here. Trust her." The confrontation. While Willow Bloom worked inside, Chief Stone Bear, a leader known for his imposing presence and careful judgment, called a swift council. Thunder Voice, a warrior whose family had suffered recent losses to settlers, was furious. "He invites ruin. When her people find us, they will bring accusations and fire." Climax of Chapter 4. Stone Bear listened patiently. "The child," he stated finally, "has drawn its first breath close to our fire. We will offer sanctuary for 7 days. Then we must find a way to return them safely. Our honor demands we tend to the wound Kestrel has opened." The timeline was set. The tension lingered, a promise of conflict. Inside the lodge, time blurred. Willow Bloom's herbal remedies and skilled hands worked wonders. Alara's broken leg was expertly splinted. The tiny girl, Dawn, thrived, feeding well and growing stronger day by day. Alara named her, gazing at the determined little face. "Her name is Dawn," she told Kestrel, "because she is the beginning of my new life." Kestrel began his vigil, his role shifting from rescuer to guardian and interpreter. He brought gifts, a carved rattle, fresh berries. He began to teach Alara simple Shawnee words for family and forest. Alara, in turn, shared simple English words with him. Community acceptance. The village women, especially Fawn Leap, a young mother with her own infant, began to soften, offering Alara support, recognizing the universal struggle of motherhood. The rising threat. New plot point. 10 days into their stay, as Alara was taking her first tentative steps outside with Kestrel's support, a scouting party returned. They had been near the Cumberland Gap. Kestrel pulled Alara inside quickly, his face grim. "The white wagon leader is back," he whispered, translating the scout's report. "He searches the ravine again. He speaks of a lost family member, but he searches alone, and he carries a heavy rifle." Climax of Chapter 5. The danger was closing in. Silas was not simply letting her go, he was securing his lie. Kestrel knew he had to act faster than the chief's original timeline. But now he was not just protecting Alara from the elements, he was protecting her from murder. Alara, strengthened by fear and gratitude, finally shared the full truth with Kestrel. "Silas thinks I'm dead. He's claiming my land. He won't stop until he knows I'm truly gone." Kestrel absorbed the gravity of the betrayal. He had risked everything for a woman abandoned by her own blood for paper. The Shawnee perspective. Kestrel, in turn, shared the heavy truth of his people. The white man promises peace, then moves the boundary again. My father's brother, he was killed over a misunderstanding about a stolen horse. Justice never comes for us. The internal climax. That evening, as the council gathered, Thunder Voice strode into the center. "Kestrel has kept secrets," he accused, pointing an angry finger. "He knows the white man is searching nearby. He risked the lives of our children for a stranger's grudge." Kestrel's defense. Kestrel rose, placing his hand over his heart. He didn't deny the danger. "I did not save a settler," he declared in his native tongue. "I saved a mother. The choice was between life and cowardice. I chose the life born on our soil. If we let our fears turn us into the very things the settlers accuse us of being, heartless savages, then we have lost everything already." Climax of Chapter 6. Chief Stonebear raised his hand, silencing the argument. Kestrel's passion and truth had resonated. The chief nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on Kestrel. "Your heart is true, my son, but your path is now doubly dangerous." The council's decision was firm. They would accelerate the departure. Act second, the confrontation. 4,000 words continued. Chapter 7. The Stonebear's verdict, approx. 800 words. The resolution of internal conflict and new mission. The air in the council lodge was thick with the scent of wood smoke and unresolved tension following Kestrel's passionate defense. Chief Stonebear remained impassive, his weathered face a mask of long wisdom. He represented the cautious responsibility of the entire tribe. "Your heart speaks the truth of the Creator, Kestrel," the chief finally spoke, his voice deep and measured. "But your compassion is a knife that cuts two ways. The white man Silas searches. He will not stop. Our honor is now bound to this child born in our shadows." He looked at Alara, still resting in Willowbloom's lodge, and then at dawn. "The child has a blood tie to this ground now. We cannot abandon our responsibility." The leader's decision. Stonebear decreed that the 7-day limit was lifted, but the departure would be swift. In 3 sunrises, Kestrel will travel to the trading post. He will take the woman and the child. Thunder Voice grumbled, but the chief's decision was absolute. Stonebear then turned to Kestrel, his eyes conveying a mix of pride and solemn fear. "The weight of responsibility," new plot point. "The post is 3 days' journey," the chief said. "Dangerous ground. You will not go merely as a guide, but as a guardian. Silas Thorne seeks murder to hide his greed. That greed is the white man's disease." He reached beneath his tunic and pulled out an object wrapped in soft leather, a short, bone-handled fighting knife, sharpened by generations. He placed it in Kestrel's hand. "This protects the innocent, not only the woman, but the dawn who belongs to the Great Spirit and to us." The gesture was profound. It elevated the mission from a mere escort to a sanctioned defense of tribal honor. Kestrel felt the cool weight of the knife and the heavy burden of the chief's trust. His role as the shadow runner now included being the guardian. Willowbloom approached Kestrel later, her eyes twinkling with understanding. She offered him a small pouch of dried herbs and a word of caution. "The white world smells of deceit, grandson. Do not let their customs cloud your sight. Trust the forest and trust the life you saved." She reinforced the theme of humanity over racial conflict. 3 mornings later, Alara, weak but determined, was placed on a travois pulled by Kestrel. Dawn was bundled snugly in a carrier Fawn Leap had loaned, a subtle nod to community acceptance. The journey was marked by silence, tension, and the constant vigilance of Kestrel. He moved with the suspenseful grace of a predator, reading every snapped twig and shifting shadow. The contrast of landscapes. They moved from the silent, protective canopy of the Shawnee forest into the more open, scarred land near the settler trails, a jarring visual contrast emphasizing the different worlds they inhabited. On the second afternoon, near a river crossing known as the Serpent's Coil, the tension broke. Kestrel stopped abruptly, lifting his hand. "Wait," he whispered, drawing the knife Stone Bear had given him. They were ambushed, not by Silas, but by three rough, armed white trappers who saw the defenseless white woman and the Shawnee warrior as easy prey, or perhaps mistook them for a Shawnee raid. The action climax. Kestrel fought with a practiced, fluid brutality, defending Alara with the desperate fury of a man protecting his own. He was swift, utilizing the terrain and his knife expertly. Alara, despite her splinted leg, used a heavy branch to strike one trapper who lunged at Kestrel from behind. The trappers were quickly repelled, two fleeing and one badly injured. Kestrel sustained a deep cut on his arm. The deepening bond. As Kestrel quickly dressed his own wound, Alara, ignoring the throbbing in her leg, crawled to him. She took the clean linen strips Willowbloom had provided and carefully bound his wound, her fingers trembling against his dark, muscular skin. "Thank you," she said, her voice raw. "You are more honorable than any man I have ever known." Kestrel met her gaze, his eyes intense. He did not translate the emotion, but he placed his unwounded hand gently on her shoulder. The shared act of survival had forged an unbreakable link, moving their relationship beyond mere rescuer and rescued. The next day, they reached the trading post, a small, dilapidated collection of log cabins and stockades. It felt chaotic, loud, and brutally foreign after the quiet sanctuary of the Shawnee village. Kestrel quickly located Mr. Halloway, the fair-dealing fur trader Chief Stone Bear had mentioned. "I bring a woman and a new child," Kestrel told Halloway in the limited trade English. "Her people left her to die. I ask you to shelter them until she is strong and protect her from the man who hunts her." Halloway, a grizzled man who had seen the worst of both worlds, looked at the exhausted Alara and the tiny baby. He agreed. The final showdown. Just as Kestrel was preparing to leave, a familiar, heavy figure rode into the clearing, Silas Thorne. He scanned the post, saw Alara, and his face contorted in a mask of shock and furious greed. "Abigail," he uses her original name to assert ownership. "Thank God that savage kidnapped you. Where are the papers?" Silas lunged toward Alara, his hand reaching for his sidearm. "The ultimate contrast," Alara's voice. Kestrel stepped instantly between them, the knife from Stone Bear gleaming. But before the inevitable violence could erupt, Alara spoke. "Stop, Silas." Her voice, though shaky, carried an authority born of absolute moral clarity. She pulled herself to her feet, leaning heavily on Halloway's support. "He did not kidnap me. He saved me. You and Hester pushed me into the ravine to steal my land grant. You left me to die, and you left your niece to die." The few settlers and trappers present fell silent, stunned by the accusation. Alara had chosen to publicly expose the white man's evil to protect the Shawnee man's good. Silas sputtered, denying the claim, but the truth was etched on Alara's face and in the unwavering posture of Kestrel. The farewell. Silas, realizing his murder plot had failed and his reputation was ruined, slunk away in impotent rage. Kestrel stepped close to Alara and Dawn. He didn't speak of future or love. He spoke of duty. "You are safe now. I must go." Alara's eyes filled with tears, realizing the depth of his sacrifice. "What will happen to you?" Kestrel simply touched his chest. "I return to my people." He gently untied the small buckskin pouch from his belt, the one containing Willowbloom's Buaho men. He placed it in Alara's hand, touching Dawn's tiny head once. "May the spirit guide your Dawn," he whispered in Shawnee, turning swiftly. Alara watched him go, a figure dissolving into the deep forest shadows. She was alone, penniless, but alive, holding her child in a Shawnee symbol of protection. Her journey west had ended in an unexpected place, and her new life was built on a foundation of humanity that transcended the war between two worlds. The journey to the trading post was a descent from sanctuary into anxiety. The dense, whispering forest of the Shawnee lands gradually gave way to ragged, open terrain, lands scarred by careless logging and the rough passage of wagons. This was the volatile crossroads, a visual contrast emphasizing the tension between the two worlds. Kestrel pulled the travois, his movements now taut, a silent predator on alert. He kept Alara and the sleeping dawn close to his back, his senses cataloging every sound. He wasn't relying on maps or trails. He was reading the land for danger. "We are close to the river," he whispered to Alara during a brief stop, his voice tight. "The serpent's coil. White trappers use it." Just as they approached the river crossing, the danger materialized. Kestrel's warning was sudden, a sharp hiss. "Down!" They were ambushed by three rough, armed white trappers, their faces hidden by grime and greed. They didn't recognize Alara or Silas's specific grudge. They only saw a lone Shawnee with a white woman and assumed theft or easy plunder. "Well, well, look what the redskin dragged in," one trapper sneered, raising his rifle. Kestrel moved instantly, a flash of righteous anger. He shoved the travois behind a large fallen log and drew the bone-handled knife gifted by Stone Bear. The fight was swift, brutal, and silent on Kestrel's part, punctuated only by the trappers' panicked grunts. Kestrel fought not with fury, but with the controlled desperation of a man protecting his whole world. While Kestrel engaged two men, the third trapper, seeing Alara cowering, rushed toward her. Alara's fear evaporated, replaced by a surge of pure maternal adrenaline. Ignoring the searing pain in her splinted leg, she grabbed a thick, broken branch lying nearby and swung it with surprising force, catching the trapper hard across the chest. He staggered back, coughing. This brief distraction allowed Kestrel to finish his engagement. The two trappers, seeing their comrade fall and realizing the Shawnee warrior was more than they could handle, fled, melting back into the brush. The aftermath. Kestrel stood panting, his arm bleeding freely from a deep gash sustained during the skirmish. Alara crawled to him, her face stained with mud and tears, yet fiercely determined. She used the clean linen strips Willow Bloom had given her, carefully binding Kestrel's wound. "You saved us again," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You risked your life against your own people's warnings, and now against yours." Kestrel's gaze locked with hers, a moment of shared exhaustion and intense understanding. He didn't offer the simple translation, help. He offered a truth far deeper. Our lives now are tied to the same coil. The shared act of violence and healing had forged an unbreakable link, strengthening their bond beyond cultural barriers and fear. They were no longer a rescuer and a rescued. They were allies. They reached the trading post by midday, a collection of crude wooden structures that smelled of unwashed men, cheap whiskey, and cured furs. It was loud, chaotic, and felt violently foreign after the serene quiet of the Shawnee village. Kestrel, weary but resolute, pulled the travois to the center of the post. He spoke quickly to Mr. Halloway, the grizzled, fair-dealing fur trader. "I bring a woman," Kestrel said, his English deliberate. "She needs shelter. Her own people left her to die. Her child is new. The man who hunted her may follow." Halloway, a man who had long navigated the blurred lines of the frontier, looked at Alara's bruised face and the splinted leg, then at the tiny infant. He saw the truth in Kestrel's eyes and the obvious signs of trauma. He agreed to provide sanctuary. The final showdown. Kestrel was preparing to make his silent departure when the familiar sound of a horse galloping hard brought every head turning. Silas Thorne burst into the clearing, his face, etched with days of frantic searching, contorted into a mask of shock and savage triumph when he spotted Alara. "Abigail," Silas used her married name, the name tied to his claim. "You're alive. That savage kidnapped you. Where is the pouch? Where are the papers?" His greed was blinding. Silas lunged forward, reaching for his sidearm. Kestrel instantly stepped between him and Alara, the bone-handled knife flashing into the sunlight. Ilara's courage. But before Kestrel could draw blood, Ilara pushed herself forward, leaning heavily on Mr. Holloway's shoulder. She spoke, her voice shaky, yet carrying absolute moral authority over the stunned crowd. "Stop, Silas!" Ilara's voice cracked the silence. "He did not kidnap me. He saved me. You and Hester pushed me into the ravine to steal my land grant. You left me to die, and you left your niece, Dawn, to die." The assembled trappers, missionaries, and laborers gasped. The raw, unfiltered truth, the contrast between the white man's evil and the native man's compassion, stood undeniable. Silas spluttered denials, but his frantic greed betrayed him. The farewell. Defeated and exposed, Silas mounted his horse and fled in furious, impotent rage. Kestrel sheathed his knife. His duty was done. He was once again the shadow runner belonging to the forest. Ilara stepped toward him, tears streaming down her face. "You cannot leave," she pleaded. "They will kill you if you return alone. And I have nothing without you." Kestrel gently shook his head. "My world is not your world. My people wait." He knew staying would only bring more danger to them both. He reached into his belt and pulled out the small buckskin pouch containing Willow Bloom's Bua Ho Men, tying it carefully around Dawn's carrier. "This protects your Dawn," he whispered in Shawnee. He touched Ilara's cheek once, a gesture of profound respect and silent love, and then turned. He walked toward the forest edge, a figure dissolving back into the protective shadows. Ilara Vance, holding her daughter Dawn and a tangible symbol of Shawnee grace, watched him go. She was penniless, injured, but alive. Her journey had ended not in Oregon, but at a cultural crossroads, with her future built on the courage of one man who had chosen humanity over hatred.